Knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the restaurant. It wasn't obvious at first. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. Soft golden lights hung from the ceiling, reflecting off polished glass and silverware. There were flowers on every table, white roses arranged so precisely they didn't look real. The place smelled like expensive perfume and roasted meat. It was the kind of dinner you only saw in magazines or paid for. And I had paid for it. I paused near the entrance, letting my eyes adjust as I scanned the room. My son, Ethan, waved at me from across the hall. He was smiling, but something about it felt rehearsed. Next to him stood his wife, Lily, glowing in a dress I distinctly remembered covering last month when her card declined unexpectedly. I smiled back and walked toward them, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Mom, you made it," Ethan said, hugging me quickly. Too quickly. "Of course I did," I replied, forcing warmth into my voice. I wouldn't miss Emma's birthday. My granddaughter turned 8 today. 8. I still remembered the day she was born, how tiny her fingers were wrapped around mine. Back then, everything felt simple. Back then, I mattered. Lily leaned in, air kissing my cheek. "We're so happy you're here, Sarah," she said sweetly. Her voice always had that sugary tone, like everything she said came with a hidden price tag. I glanced past them toward the long table set for the family. My steps slowed. There were 8 place settings. I counted again. 8. But there were 9 of us. A small, quiet feeling settled in my chest, like something cracking just beneath the surface. "Where should I sit?" I asked casually, gesturing toward the table. For a split second, Lily's expression flickered. Just a flicker. Then she laughed lightly, placing her hand on her chest as if she'd just realized something embarrassing. "Oh no, don't tell me we messed that up," she said. "I swear we double-checked everything." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, it must have been a mix-up. You know how reservations go." A mix-up. I looked at the table again. The name cards were neatly arranged, carefully placed. No empty spot. No extra chair. Nothing about it looked accidental. "I can just grab another chair," I said. "Oh, no," Lily interrupted quickly, waving her hand. "The staff here is really strict about arrangements. But there are other tables nearby. You'll be more comfortable there anyway." More comfortable. Away from them. A couple sitting at the table behind me glanced over briefly before returning to their wine. I felt the heat rising in my face, but I kept my smile. "Of course," I said quietly. "Whatever works." Emma ran up to me then, saving me from the moment. "Grandma," she shouted, throwing her arms around my waist. I bent down and hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Did you see the cake? It's huge. And there's a singer coming later," she said excitedly. "Of course there is," I murmured, because nothing was ever small when someone else was paying. I let go of her slowly, watching as she ran back to her parents. They guided her to her seat, center of the table, like a little queen. And I turned toward the smaller tables at the edge of the room. I chose one near the window and sat down alone. From there, I could see everything. The way Lily laughed too loudly at something a guest said. The way Ethan leaned into conversations, relaxed, comfortable, like nothing was wrong. Like his mother wasn't sitting 10 feet away at a table meant for strangers. A waiter approached me. "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" "Just water," I said. As he walked away, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up instantly. Notifications. Messages. But I ignored them. Instead, I opened my banking app. There it was. The truth. Monthly transfers. Mortgage payments. Utilities. School tuition. Credit card bills. Shopping expenses disguised as emergencies. Every single one tied back to them.
To this.
To the table I wasn't invited to sit at. I scrolled slowly, my finger trembling just slightly. Thousands of dollars. Month after month. Year after year. I had told myself it was love, support, family. But sitting there, watching them laugh without me, it didn't feel like love. It felt like I had bought a ticket to a show where I wasn't even allowed on stage. Applause broke out suddenly. I looked up. The cake was being brought out, 3 tiers, decorated in gold and pink. Emma clapped excitedly as everyone sang. Lily stood beside her, glowing with pride. Ethan had his arm around her, smiling like this was the happiest moment of his life. No one looked at me, not once. I sang quietly from my seat, my voice barely audible over the crowd. When Emma blew out the candles, everyone cheered. I clapped too. Of course I did. I stayed until the end. I watched the gifts being opened, the photos being taken, the speeches being made. I watched Lily thank everyone who made this night possible, her eyes sweeping across the room, skipping right over me. Not a word. Not one. When it was finally time to leave, I approached Emma to say goodbye. She hugged me tightly. Thank you for my present, Grandma. I love it. I'm glad, I said softly, kissing her forehead. Ethan gave me a quick hug. Drive safe, okay? Always do. Lily smiled politely. Thanks for coming, Sarah. And sorry again about the seating thing. The seating thing. Of course, I replied. I walked out of the restaurant alone. The night air was cool, quiet. A sharp contrast to the laughter still echoing behind me. I stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the dark window glass. I looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I had just been made to feel that way. The drive home was silent. No music. No radio. Just my thoughts, repeating the same moment over and over again. 8 seats. 9 people.
No me stack.
By the time I pulled into my driveway, something inside me had settled. Not anger. Not even sadness. Something colder. Clearer. Inside the house, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I walked straight to the kitchen, placed my purse on the table, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen filled the room. My bank account loaded instantly. All the transfers were still there. Active. Scheduled. Reliable. Just like me. I sat down slowly. Then, one by one, I started deleting them. I didn't feel anything when I finished. That was the strangest part. I had expected shaking hands, maybe tears, maybe even panic. 15 years of habits don't just disappear in a single night. But as I sat there staring at the empty list of scheduled payments, I felt calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just quiet, like a room after all the noise has finally stopped. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, listening to the ticking clock on the wall. For years, every decision I made somehow led back to them. Ethan, Lily, Emma. What they needed. What they wanted. What crisis was waiting around the corner that only I could fix with a transfer and a reassuring smile. And now, for the first time, there was nothing waiting for me to solve. The next morning felt different. I woke up earlier than usual, even though I had nowhere to be. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and warm, and for a moment I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what had changed. Then it hit me.
No payments.
No responsibility. No constant pressure humming quietly in the background of my life. I made coffee slowly, taking my time in a way I hadn't in years. Usually, my mornings were filled with messages. Lily asking if I could help just this once. Ethan calling about temporary setbacks. Reminders from the bank about outgoing transfers I had already memorized by heart. But today, my phone was silent. Too silent. By noon, the first call came.
Ethan.
I watched his name flash across the screen, vibrating against the table.
Once. Twice.
3 times. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it stopped, then placed the phone face down and went back to watering my plants. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Then again. By the 4th call, I picked it up. "Hi, Mom," Ethan said, his voice already tight. "Something weird is going on with the bank. The mortgage payment didn't go through." "I know," I said calmly. There was a pause. "You know?" "I canceled it." Silence stretched across the line, heavy and disbelieving. "You what?" he finally said. "I canceled all of them," I replied, just as evenly. "Mortgage, bills, tuition, everything." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear his mind scrambling to catch up. "Mom, you can't just do that," he said, his tone shifting from confusion to irritation. "We rely on that money." There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Why?" Just that. "We rely on that money." "I know," I said quietly. "That's the problem." "What does that even mean?" he snapped. "Did something happen? Is this about last night?" "Because Lily already told you that was just a mistake." "A mistake." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out the window at my small garden. "Do you really believe that?" "Of course I do," he said quickly. Too quickly. Why wouldn't I? I let the silence answer for me. "Mom," he continued, his voice softening slightly, switching tactics, "if this is about the dinner, you're overreacting. These things happen. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I closed my eyes for a moment. "Ethan, when was the last time you invited me somewhere and made sure I felt included?" "What?" "That's not fair." "When was the last time you called me just to talk?" I interrupted. "Not to ask for something, not to explain a bill, just to ask how I am." He didn't answer. "You didn't even notice I didn't have a seat," I added quietly. "Not until I pointed it out." "That's not true," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I just thought." "You didn't think," I said. "That's the point." The line went quiet again. Then, in the background, I heard Lily's voice. Sharp. Urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. Ethan sighed. "Look, Mom, we don't have time for this right now. The bank is already calling, and Lily's car payment is overdue. Can you just fix it? We'll talk about everything later." Fix it, like I always did. "No," I said. The word surprised even me. It came out steady, without hesitation. "No," he repeated. "No. I'm not fixing it. Are you serious right now?" His voice rose. "We have responsibilities. Emma's school. Then you should figure out how to pay for them," I said. "With what?" he shot back. "You know how things have been." Yes. I knew exactly how things had been. "I know you've been living a life you can't afford," I said calmly. "And I've been funding it." "That's not fair," he snapped. "You offered to help." "I did," I agreed. "And now I'm choosing to stop." "You can't just choose that," he said, his voice breaking into anger. "That's not how this works." "It is now." Another voice broke in Lily's, louder this time. "Give me the phone." There was a brief scuffle. Then her voice filled the line. "Sarah, I don't know what kind of mood you're in, but this is extremely irresponsible," she said, her sweetness completely gone. "Emma is going to suffer because of this." I let out a slow breath. "Emma has 2 parents. And they're doing their best," she snapped. "You think this is easy for us? You think we enjoy having to depend on you?" I almost laughed. "You've depended on me for 15 years, I said. "That sounds pretty comfortable to me." "That's not true," she shot back. "We've had setbacks. Temporary situations. 15 years isn't temporary." Her tone hardened. "If this is about last night, I already said it was a mistake." "No," I said quietly. "It wasn't." Silence. "You didn't forget a chair," I continued. You just didn't think I deserved one. That's ridiculous, she said, but there was something thinner in her voice now. Less certain. Is it? I asked. Because everything about that table was planned. Every detail. Every seat. You're being dramatic. And you're being honest for the first time, I replied. That hit. I could feel it in the pause that followed. Fine, she said finally, dropping the act completely. Let's be clear then. If you don't turn those payments back on, we're going to lose everything. I understand. The house. The car. Emma's school. I understand. And you're okay with that? She demanded. You're okay hurting your own granddaughter? I tightened my grip on the phone. That one landed exactly where she intended. But something had changed. I'm not hurting her, I said slowly. You are. By building a life you couldn't sustain. That's unbelievable, she said, her voice shaking with anger. After everything we've done for you. I almost smiled at that. What exactly have you done for me? I asked. She didn't answer. Because from where I'm standing, I continued, the only thing you've done is take. And last night, you made it very clear that even that wasn't enough to earn me a place at your table. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm finally seeing them clearly. There was a long silence. Then, colder than before, she said, if you do this, don't expect things to go back to normal. I looked out the window again, at the quiet street, at the life that suddenly felt like it belonged to me again. I don't, I said. The call ended. I stood there for a while, phone still in my hand, listening to the silence return. It felt different now, heavier, but also honest. For the first time in years, no one was asking me for anything. No one needed me. And somehow, instead of feeling empty, I felt free. The silence didn't break the next day, or the day after that. At first, I thought they would come back quickly, calls, messages, apologies carefully wrapped around new requests. That had always been the pattern. Tension, guilt, resolution, and then another transfer. But this time there was nothing. No calls from Ethan. No dramatic texts from Lily. Not even a picture of Emma. It was as if I had been erased. I told myself this was what I wanted. Space. Freedom. Distance from the constant pressure. But there's a difference between choosing silence and being shut out by it. The house felt bigger than usual, every room echoing slightly, as if reminding me just how alone I really was. On the fourth day, I caught myself staring at my phone, waiting. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't just used to helping them, I was used to being needed. And now that I wasn't, I didn't quite know who I was anymore. I tried to fill the time. I cleaned the kitchen twice, reorganized my closet, even went through old boxes in the attic that I hadn't touched in years. Anything to keep my hands busy, my mind occupied. But no matter what I did, everything circled back to the same quiet thought. What if I went too far? That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. A week passed before I left the house for something other than groceries. I decided to walk to a small cafe a few blocks away, somewhere I used to go years ago before life became complicated. The bell above the door chimed softly as I stepped inside, and for a moment, it felt like stepping into a different version of my life. Simpler. Quieter. I ordered tea and sat by the window, watching people pass by outside. Families, couples, parents holding children's hands. Normal life. The kind I thought I had, or at least something close to it. Sarah? I looked up, surprised. A woman stood a few feet away, smiling uncertainly. It took me a moment to recognize her. Oh, Claire, I said, standing slightly. It's been a while. Claire had been Emma's babysitter years ago. Back when Emma was still small enough to fall asleep on my shoulder. Back when I used to come over just to spend time with her, not to pay for something. Claire sat down across from me, without waiting to be invited. I haven't seen you in forever. How are you? I'm good, I said, though the word felt unfamiliar. That's nice, she said, then hesitated. I actually heard something about your family. My chest tightened slightly. Oh, she nodded, lowering her voice. About Emma switching schools. That must have been really hard. I blinked. Switching schools. Claire's expression shifted immediately. Wait, you didn't know? A cold feeling spread through me. No, I said slowly. I didn't. She looked uncomfortable now, glancing down at her cup. Lily mentioned it when she asked if I could help watch Emma after school sometimes. She said it was temporary, just until things stabilized. Stabilized. I felt like the floor beneath me had shifted slightly. Oh, I said quietly. I see. We made small talk after that, but I barely heard any of it. My mind was already somewhere else, replaying her words over and over again. Switching schools. After everything I had paid for. After years of insisting that Emma needed the best. And now it was gone. I left the cafe shortly after, barely remembering to say goodbye. The walk home felt longer than usual, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached my house, I wasn't calm anymore. I was unsettled. That night, I did something I had promised myself I wouldn't do. I drove past their house. I told myself it was just curiosity, just to see if everything was okay, just to confirm that Emma was fine. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I needed to see the consequences of my decision. The street looked the same at first.
Quiet. Familiar.
But as I got closer, the differences became impossible to ignore. The lawn was overgrown. The lights were off in half the house. And in the front yard, a for sale sign. I stopped the car without realizing it. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at it. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a small adjustment. This was everything collapsing. My chest tightened as I looked toward the window. The curtains were partially open, and through the glass, I could see Emma sitting on the floor, alone, watching television in a room that looked emptier than I remembered. Something inside me cracked. This is your fault. The thought came instantly, sharp and unforgiving. You did this. I gripped the steering wheel, my hands trembling slightly. I had wanted them to take responsibility, to stop relying on me, to build something real instead of something dependent on my support. But I hadn't imagined it like this. Not Emma sitting alone in a half-empty house. Not a for sale sign on the lawn. Not this. I drove away quickly, unable to look any longer. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, heard Claire's voice, saw that sign standing in the yard like a final judgment. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I had chosen my pride over my family. By morning, the guilt had settled deep in my chest, heavy and persistent. I tried to ignore it. Tried to remind myself why I had made the decision in the first place. The years of being used. The constant expectation. The humiliation at the dinner. But none of that erased the image of Emma. On the third week of silence, something unexpected happened. Someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so for a moment, I just stood there listening. The knock came again, firm, deliberate. I walked to the door slowly and looked through the peephole. A woman stood outside, mid-30s, neatly dressed, holding a folder. I didn't recognize her. I opened the door cautiously. "Sarah?" she asked. "Yes." "My name is Emily Carter," she said gently. "I'm with Child Services." My stomach dropped. "I'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind." For a second, I couldn't speak. Child Services. Because of me. Is Emma okay? I asked immediately. "She's fine," Emily said quickly. This isn't about immediate danger. We just received a report, and I need to follow up. A report.
Of course.
I stepped aside and let her in, my mind already racing. As she sat down in my living room, opening her folder, I felt something shift inside me again. This wasn't just about money anymore. This had become something bigger, something I couldn't ignore. And for the first time since I canceled those payments, I wasn't sure anymore if I had done the right thing. I didn't sit down right away. For a moment, I just stood there in my own living room, watching Emily as she calmly placed her folder on the table, as if this was just another routine visit. Maybe for her it was. For me, it felt like the ground beneath my life had shifted again. "Please," she said gently, gesturing toward the chair. "This won't take long." I nodded and sat across from her, folding my hands together to keep them from shaking. "You said there was a report." "Yes," she replied, opening the folder. "We received a call expressing concern about a child's sudden change in living conditions and financial stability. The caller mentioned that a family member had withdrawn significant financial support." A family member?
Me.
I swallowed slowly. "So, someone reported me for not giving money?" Emily met my eyes, her expression neutral but not unkind. "People report all kinds of things when they're worried. My job is simply to understand the situation and make sure the child is safe."
Safe.
The word echoed in my head. "Emma is safe," I said immediately. "She has two parents who are perfectly capable of taking care of her." Emily nodded. "That's what I'm here to determine. Can you tell me about your relationship with them?"
So I did.
I told her everything. Not in the emotional, broken way I had replayed it in my mind, but clearly, step by step. The years of financial support. The gradual shift from occasional help to complete dependence. The way requests turned into expectations. The dinner. The missing seat. The moment something inside me finally said enough. She listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, the room felt quieter than before. "And since you stopped the payments?" she asked. "I haven't heard from them," I said. "Not really. Just one call. Arguments. Then nothing." Emily closed the folder slowly. "I understand. And I want to be very clear about something. You are not legally obligated to support your adult son or his family." The words landed, but they didn't bring the relief I expected. "But Emma," I started, "is being fed, clothed, and housed," Emily finished gently. "Yes, her lifestyle has changed. That's an adjustment, not neglect." Adjustment. That word again. I looked down at my hands. She had to change schools. "Yes," Emily said. "That can be difficult. But it's also something many families go through, for financial reasons. It doesn't automatically mean harm." I let out a slow breath. "So, I didn't do anything wrong?" I asked, though the question felt heavier than just legal responsibility. Emily studied me for a moment before answering. "That depends on what you mean by wrong." I looked up. "From a legal standpoint, no," she said. "From a human standpoint, that's more complicated. But I will say this, supporting someone in a way that prevents them from standing on their own can sometimes do more harm than good." Her words settled into the silence between us. More harm than good. For years, I had believed the opposite. That every payment was helping. That every sacrifice meant I was being a good mother, a good grandmother. That love meant giving, endlessly, without question. And now someone was telling me that maybe it hadn't been love at all, or at least not the kind that helped. Emily stood up, gathering her things. "Based on what you've told me, I don't see any reason for further action. But I would encourage you to take care of yourself too, Sarah. Situations like this, they're rarely just about money."
No.
They weren't. After she left, the house felt different again. Not empty, not heavy, just quiet in a new way. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my thoughts moving slower now, more deliberate. Her words kept replaying in my mind, not as accusations, but as something closer to clarity. Adjustment, not harm. More harm than good. For the first time since all of this started, I allowed myself to consider something I had been avoiding. What if Emma wasn't broken by this? What if she was learning? That thought stayed with me through the evening, through dinner, through the long hours where I used to fill silence with worry. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, another realization began to take shape. I didn't actually know how they were living now. Everything I had seen, the house, the sign, Emma in the window, it was just a snapshot. A moment. My interpretation of it. But I hadn't seen the whole picture. I hadn't seen what came after. That curiosity lingered until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Later that night, I opened my laptop, not to check my bank account this time, but something else. Social media. I hadn't checked it in weeks. Maybe months. It had always been Lily's stage. Perfect photos, perfect captions, perfect life. But now I needed to see what story she was telling. Her profile loaded slowly. The first thing I noticed was how different everything looked. Gone were the polished restaurant photos, the expensive vacations, the designer outfits casually displayed like everyday life. In their place were simpler images. Emma at what looked like a school fair, holding a balloon. Ethan working, actually working, covered in dust, building something with his hands. Lily behind a counter in what looked like a cafe, wearing an apron, her hair pulled back, smiling, but not the same smile as before. I scrolled slowly. Each post told a story, not of loss, but of struggle and something else. Effort. One caption read, "Starting over isn't easy, but sometimes it's necessary." Another, "Learning to appreciate what really matters." And then one that made my chest tighten. "Real support isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it forces you to grow." I stared at that one for a long time. Was that meant for me? Or was it something she told herself to make sense of everything? The comments were filled with sympathy, encouragement, admiration even. People calling her strong,
Brave.
resilient. In her version of the story, they weren't people who had depended on someone else for years. They were survivors. And me? I didn't need to guess my role. I kept scrolling until I found a photo of Emma. She was sitting at a table doing homework. The room was smaller than before, simpler, but there was something different in her expression. She looked focused.
Calm.
Not unhappy. Not broken. Just different. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe this wasn't destruction. Maybe it was change. And maybe it was something they needed. That thought didn't erase the guilt completely. It didn't suddenly make everything feel right, but it shifted something inside me, just enough to let a new possibility exist. That I hadn't ended their lives. I had changed them. The question was, into what? I closed the laptop slowly, the glow of the screen fading from the room. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the urge to call, or fix, or step back in. Instead, I sat there in the quiet and realized something else. They were learning to live without me, and I was learning to live without being needed. And maybe that was exactly what had to happen. For months passed before I heard the truth. Not the version on social media. Not the carefully shaped story Lily presented to the world, where struggle looked noble and every hardship came wrapped in a lesson. I had watched those posts quietly, without reacting, without reaching out, trying to understand what was real and what was performance. But the truth didn't come from them. It came from someone who had nothing left to gain by protecting them. Her name was Melissa. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since she and Lily had a falling out that no one ever explained properly. Back then, I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to get involved in their drama. I stayed in my role, Supportive, helpful, convenient. Looking back, I realized how much I had chosen not to see. When my phone rang that afternoon and her name appeared on the screen, I almost didn't answer. Something about it felt intentional, like a door I had closed a long time ago was suddenly opening again. Hello.
Eddie.
It's Melissa. I hope this isn't a bad time. Her voice was hesitant, but there was something firm underneath it. Not gossip. Not curiosity. Something heavier. It's fine, I said slowly. What's going on? There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, like she was deciding how much to say. I heard what happened, she said finally. About you cutting them off. Of course she had. That tends to travel fast, I replied. Yeah, she said quietly. But I don't think you've heard everything. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. What do you mean? Another pause. I think you deserve to know how Lily really talked about you, she said. The words landed harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away. Part of me didn't want to hear it. But another part, the part that had been growing stronger these past months, needed to.
Go on, I said.
Melissa exhaled slowly. Back when we were still close, we used to have these dinners. Just us, a few friends. No husbands, no kids. And Lily, she talked. A lot. Something in my chest shifted. About what? I asked, though I already had a feeling.
About you, she said.
The silence that followed felt thick, almost suffocating. She didn't see you the way you thought she did, Melissa continued. Not as family.
Not really.
I sat down slowly, the weight of her words settling in. What did she say? I asked quietly. Melissa didn't hesitate this time. She used to call you her safety net, she said. Her backup plan. The person who made sure she never had to worry about anything going wrong. That alone hurt more than I wanted to admit. But she wasn't finished. She planned things, Sarah, Melissa added. Not in a dramatic way, just carefully. She knew exactly how to ask for money without making it sound like a demand. She'd test different approaches, guilt, gratitude, even subtle pressure. My throat tightened. She practiced? I asked, barely above a whisper. Yes. The word hit like a quiet explosion. She'd say things like, if I mention Emma enough, she'll offer on her own, or if I make it sound temporary, she won't question it. Melissa paused. It wasn't emotional for her. It was strategy. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, so many conversations replayed in my mind differently. The hesitation in Lily's voice that I thought was vulnerability. The careful wording. The way every request somehow made me feel like helping was my idea. She made me feel like I was being generous. I said slowly. That was the point, Melissa replied. I pressed my hand against my forehead, trying to steady myself.
There's more, she said gently.
Of course there was. She didn't like having you around as much as she pretended, Melissa continued. She thought you were inconvenient. Inconvenient, I repeated. She used to joke that it would be easier if you just sent money and skipped the visits. That one didn't hurt. It cut. Deep and clean. The dinner. The missing seat. It wasn't a moment. It was the result of years of quiet resentment finally showing itself. Why are you telling me this now? I asked after a long silence. Melissa hesitated. Because she came to me. That made me look up.
What?
A few weeks after you cut them off, she said. She asked me for money. Said you'd had some kind of breakdown and abandoned them. I let out a small, humorless laugh. A breakdown, I repeated. Yeah, Melissa said. She needed help covering Emma's school fees. When I said I couldn't, she suggested I take out a loan.
Of course she did.
And that's when I realized something, Melissa added. It wasn't about you. She would do this to anyone who let her. The room felt very quiet. Not heavy. Not chaotic. Just clear. Did Ethan know?
I asked.
I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Melissa didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, she said. I felt something inside me finally break. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, final way. He was there during those conversations sometimes, she continued. He didn't stop her. Sometimes he even laughed.
Laughed.
I stared at the wall in front of me, but I wasn't really seeing it anymore. All this time, I had told myself he didn't notice, that he was distracted, overwhelmed, caught between two sides. But he knew, and he chose not to care. Thank you for telling me, I said eventually, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, Melissa replied softly. I should have. Maybe, I said, but I don't think I would have listened. That was the truth. If someone had told me all of this a year ago, I would have defended them, explained it away, found reasons to justify everything, because I needed to believe I was loved. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, letting everything settle. Strangely, I didn't feel devastated. I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. Like a puzzle I had been trying to solve for years had finally clicked into place. The dinner wasn't an accident. The dependence wasn't temporary. The gratitude wasn't real. And my role in their lives had never been what I thought it was. I stood up slowly and walked to my bedroom, opening the drawer where I kept a small wooden box. Inside it was the letter I had written months ago for Emma. I opened it and read it again, this time with new eyes. Every word still felt true, but now I added something at the end. Not about Lily, not about Ethan, about myself. I didn't stop helping because I stopped loving you. I stopped because I finally understood that love shouldn't make someone smaller. And somewhere along the way, I had disappeared. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. Then I closed the drawer. For the first time since all of this began, there was no doubt left. No guilt strong enough to pull me back. No question about whether I had done the right thing. I hadn't abandoned my family. I had stepped out of something that was never truly love to begin with. And whatever came next would finally belong to me. A year passed before I saw Emma again. Not a message, not a photo, not a carefully filtered version of her life through someone else's lens. A full year of silence, distance, and learning how to exist without constantly looking over my shoulder for someone else's needs. By then, my life didn't feel empty anymore. It felt mine. I had started doing things I used to postpone indefinitely. I traveled. Nothing extravagant, just small trips to places I had always been curious about. I signed up for an art class at a local studio, something I hadn't done since I was in my 20s. I even volunteered twice a week at a community center, helping people who actually appreciated the time I gave instead of expecting it. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. It was quieter than that, but it was real. And then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a towel. I had been in the kitchen, baking out of habit more than necessity, and walked to the door. Something about the knock felt uncertain. Not demanding. Not impatient. Careful. I opened the door slowly. For a second, I didn't recognize her. She had grown taller.
Thinner.
Her face had changed in subtle ways, less round, more defined. But her eyes, I knew those immediately. Emma? I said softly. She shifted slightly on the porch, holding onto the strap of her backpack.
Ethan?
My heart tightened. Behind her, at the curb, I saw Ethan's car. He was sitting inside, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. He didn't wave, didn't get out, but he had brought her. That was enough. Do you want to come in? I asked, stepping aside. She nodded and walked past me quietly, like she wasn't sure if she still belonged here. I closed the door and followed her into the living room. She stood there for a moment looking around, taking everything in like it was both familiar and distant at the same time. It looks the same, she said. I didn't change much, I replied. That wasn't entirely true. I had changed. Are you hungry? I asked, unsure how to bridge the gap between us. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Do you still make those cookies? I smiled slightly.
Ido.
In the kitchen, I placed a plate in front of her, watching as she picked up one cookie carefully, like it carried more meaning than just sugar and chocolate. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. How have you been? I asked gently. I'm okay, she said, the automatic answer of someone who had learned not to say too much too quickly. School is different, but I like it. I made new friends. That's good. She nodded, then looked down at her hands. Mom works a lot now. And Dad too. I noticed the way she said it. Not complaining, not sad. Just stating a fact. They're trying, she added after a moment. I studied her face carefully. And how do you feel about that? I asked. She shrugged slightly. At first it was scary. Everything changed really fast. We had to move, and I didn't understand why.
She paused.
But now it feels more normal. Normal. That word again. Do you miss your old life? I asked.
She thought about it.
Some parts, she admitted. But it wasn't really real, was it? I felt something shift inside me. What makes you say that? She looked up at me then directly, more confident than I remembered. Because now my parents do things themselves, she said. Before, it felt like everything just happened. Like someone else was fixing everything all the time. Someone else.
Me.
And now? I asked. Now it feels harder, she said. But also better. Better. The words settled into the room, quiet but undeniable. We sat with that for a moment. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for and dreading. Why didn't you call me? There it was. Simple. Honest. Unavoidable. I took a slow breath before answering. Because I didn't want to make things harder for you, I said. Sometimes, when adults are dealing with something complicated, stepping in can make it worse instead of better. She frowned slightly. But I missed you. I missed you too, I said softly. Every day. She seemed to consider that, turning the cookie in her hands. Mom said you were mad at us, she said. I was hurt, I replied honestly. But not because of you. She nodded slowly. Dad said you wanted us to learn something, she added. That made me pause. What do you think I wanted you to learn? I asked. She smiled a little, almost shyly. That people should take care of themselves, she said. And that money isn't the same as love. I felt my throat tighten. That's very close, I said. She looked relieved, like she had passed some kind of test she didn't fully understand. I was mad at you at first, she admitted, because everything changed. But then I saw how my parents changed too. In what way?
They work more, she said.
But they argue less. And they seem proud sometimes, like when they fix something or pay for something on their own. I nodded slowly. That matters, I said. It does, she agreed. We sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Lighter. Connected. After a while, she stood up and walked toward the hallway, peeking into the rooms like she was rediscovering a place she had once known by heart. You still have my drawings? She asked. I do, I said. I went to my room and brought back the box. When I placed it on the table and opened it, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. You kept all of them, she said. Of course I did. She carefully picked one up, smiling as she looked at it. I remember this one. So do I. She turned to me suddenly. Can I come back again? The question was simple, but it carried everything. Yes, I said. Anytime you want. She nodded, satisfied. When it was time to leave, she hugged me tightly. I'm glad you're not gone, she said quietly. I was never gone, I replied. Just waiting. She pulled away and ran toward the car. Ethan didn't get out, but as she got in, he glanced at me briefly. For a second, our eyes met. There was something there. Not apology. Not exactly. But something closer to understanding. Then he looked away and started the engine. I stood on the porch, watching them drive off, Emma waving from the window. And, for the first time in a long time, I felt complete peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because everything was fixed, but because everything was real. I had lost the version of family I thought I had, but I had gained something better. A relationship built on truth, on choice, on respect. And as I stood there in the quiet evening, I realized something I wished I had understood years ago. Love isn't something you prove by giving everything away. Sometimes, it's something you protect by finally saying no. I knew something was wrong the moment I